All right, guys, back with a new video, and I want to talk to you about a very important subject that sort of deals with geopolitics. And by the way, this is what this particular channel shines the most. I can not only offer you mixed martial arts content, but I'm also going to give you the news. And unfortunately, in the recent current events, there have been a terrorist attack that had happened in the southern part of Russia, in particular somewhere near the Dagestani region. And by the way, a lot of this story deals with one of Khabib's gym mates, which by the way has been unnamed and have yet been unknown, but is known to the FSB, which is the Russian Federal Bureau of Investigation, their own version of it, as this guy that's been under radar for a while. And this happened to be a training partner of Khabib involved in this. So for those of you that don't understand what is going on right now, because more than likely you are watching news in America or in Great Britain, and these countries, as you know, the NATO states, they're not exactly friendly with Russia. So in other words, any terrorist attack that happens towards Russia or anything bad that happens to them, it's not going to be the highest topic in the land. Okay, that's just really the best way to put it. And I know that sounds harsh, but that's the reality of it. Russia is in the back pocket of whatever type of information that is out there regarding this particular country. So why? Because obviously they are in conflict with Ukraine, and as a result of that, well, the United States really does not want to give them any clout in any kind of way. But at the same time, when you're dealing with a terrorist attack, you can't help but report on it. Now, obviously, there was the Islamic State attacks that have happened in Moscow a couple of months ago, which was done in Russia. Now it's happening in an Orthodox church, and not only that, a Jewish synagogue was attacked at the same time. And ironically enough, that is the same time that all these synagogue riots have been going on in LA as of late. Not riots, but more like a little street fight here and there, a little protest, banter, and a combination of people just scrapping it out outside because they are angry about the Palestinian and Gaza situation. So that's what's going on. Now, what is going to happen with Islam Makhachev, Khabib, and Team Eagle, being that they are now under heavy scrutiny by the Russian government, on top of the fact that Khabib has had his $3 million seized by the Russian government based on not paying any taxes. So where is this whole story going to lead, right? Is it a separate issue? Probably so. Because obviously you're dealing with taxes, but then you're also dealing with a teammate that is known to have committed a terrorist attack. So this is a very difficult situation that Khabib is in. But you got to understand something. Here's something you got to understand, right? What you got to understand is that we are in a situation where the Russian government may not be very objective-minded in how they're going to approach the situation. And what do I mean by that? Well, are they going to separate the issue of Khabib having tax issues and having a teammate that had just committed a terrorist attack? Now, here's the other aspect of this that you got to understand from an objective point of view. There's a lot of guys that train in multiple gyms around the world, and it doesn't mean that you are associated with them in any kind of way. I'll give you a little bit of a story on my end, right? Because let's just be honest. There's been a lot of people that know who I am before the YouTube. They understand the type of, let's say, ideas or opinions that I've had or worldview, right? Sometimes when you have a certain worldview, you're going to be looked at by government agents, whether that would be your own domestic government agency or whether that would be an agency from around the world that may take a look at some particular interest in you based on specific correlations or networks you may have. Okay? So, back in 2011, let's just say that I had these types of views that were on the fringe, that were rogue to the world, that may be out of the lines of norm in everyday society, okay? Let's just try to put it plainly as that. Now, have I been looked at by, let's say, the alphabet guys? Maybe. I don't know. I'm not going to confirm or deny one way or the other, right? But I will say this. They went into talking with different people that I've trained with. And why am I bringing this up? Because obviously, these supposed terrorists that committed these acts trained in Khabib's gym, and now the FBI, or at least the Russian version of that, which is known as the FSB, is very curious to know what are the ties with Khabib and this particular suspect. My answer is probably nothing. That is the most plausible answer that I could give you. The problem is we don't know if that's all it will be. Why? Because Russia does not operate like America. In other words, put it like this. Is there corruption amongst the feds? Is there corruption amongst police forces, amongst law enforcement? Yeah, 100% there is. You can't deny that. However, between America and Russia, who would you rather have a fair trial with if you know deep in your heart that you are innocent? And even if you're not innocent, guess what? You would want to have a trial in America over Russia. And that's really what it comes down to. So why am I saying that in regards to this subject? Because Khabib may be put in a scrutiny that he doesn't need to be, because let's just call it what it is. The Russian government is not exactly a very fair and honest type of system. And neither is the United States. But the one thing you can count on in the United States is its checks and balances that you can use to either leverage for yourself or leverage your innocence, or maybe even evade a guilty verdict when you know deep in your heart that you're guilty, but they don't have the proof of it. With the Russian government, is it more plausible that they're going to act out of emotions? I'm going to say yeah. There is a high plausibility of the Russians acting in emotions rather than actual logic and burden of proof. And the problem is, we don't know what that is going to be. It would be easier if we knew that America was the one that was investigating this case and it took place in America, but it's not. You're dealing with a Russian government that is highly paranoid. You want to know why I'm telling you that they're paranoid? The Russians are blaming NATO for this terrorist attack, saying that, well, you know what? It was the Americans, it was the British, it was the French and the Germans, the whole NATO crew that was behind all this as a false flag operation. Very similar to the type of false flag operations that you saw in the Call of Duty game, the one scene where I believe it was called No Russians, where you went and shot up an entire Russian airport, but now happening obviously in reverse. No, actually not in reverse. It's actually, a Russian-on-Russian situation, because the suspects that committed these acts were done by Muslims from the Caucasus region. So they're still Russian, so that makes it a Russian-on-Russian crime nonetheless. I just hope that the Russians are going to be fair towards Khabib. Here's something you got to understand. You don't control who trains at your gym. And let me tell you, one of the reasons why you can't control who trains at your gym is because there's so many people that join combat sports gyms for different reasons, right? There is a saying that goes, if you want to see a cop and a criminal in one place, go to a boxing gym. Or i.e. in the modern terms of MMA's popularity, you would say go to an MMA gym, which is more prevalent than, let's say, a boxing gym, based on the fact that boxing gyms, well, they're limited, right? They're a limited form of fighting, but MMA gyms, they offer jiu-jitsu, and a lot of cops, law enforcement, and military guys, they love to train jiu-jitsu. But guess what? So do the homies. So you're going to run across the homies, and you're going to run across some criminals when you are dealing with a combat sports gym of any kind. So, in other words, you're going to have different types of people that are going to be there. And guess what? How about this? Speaking of Chechnya and Dagestanis, how about the Boston Bombers, the Tsarnaev brothers? Do you know what happened after the Boston Marathon bombing? You know what happened? They went and investigated their gyms. Now, obviously, the FBI knew that they had nothing to do with it, and some of these guys that they trained with weren't even Muslim, so there was no connection to Islamic terrorism with any of these gyms that they had. But they had to go and talk to them because it's just a procedural thing that they do in law enforcement, and in particular in the FBI, trying to interrogate, trying to interview all different types of people in order to understand the full pieces that is in front of you and what is going on with this particular tragedy. So all I can say at the end of this video is that I hope they are very fair to Khabib, because the one thing that we can criticize America for is, yes, has America committed atrocities around the world when it comes to the military-industrial complex and the wars that they are waging around the world? Yeah, there's no doubt about that. For the past 2 decades, this is what America has done. But the one thing I know I can be very confident towards America in is their judicial system. And by the way, the judicial system in America, in comparison to Russia, in my opinion, it goes like this. It is a 50-50 situation in America. What exactly do I mean by that? Well, it's 50% just in the way that it should be, and then it's 50% corrupt. And that other 50% can be broken down to 25-25 based on which way you really want to go, meaning that how many of them are letting the guilties go as opposed to the people that are innocent, and then how many people that are innocent actually get called in when they really have done nothing wrong. Either way, you got to understand, right? That is America in a nutshell. You have an opportunity, even if you're guilty, beyond a reasonable doubt to your inner mind, that, hey, you know what? I can still fight this case. You can't do that in other countries. You can't do that in the Middle East. You can't even do that in Romania, as you've seen with Andrew Tate. You can't do that in certain places. But guess what? You can do that in America. You can get away with things even if you are guilty. But let's just be honest about this. We know Khabib has nothing to do with terrorism whatsoever. Nothing to do with it at all. It's not in his particular... I'm not going to say it's not in his DNA, because every man, especially cage fighters, for crying out loud, have a high propensity for violence, more than the average person, right? So this idea that he's not capable of it, but ideologically, I just don't think he is in that particular sphere of thought. And why? Well, let's take a look at some issues that I have with the idea of Khabib being a radical or being an extremist. Well, first of all, let's really define these words into really what they are. Are there people that are going to look at Khabib and say, you know what, you had something to do with this? Of course, if you're a Khabib hater, if you're Conor Mcgregor, who has something against Khabib, you will say the following, that, hey, you know what, he's guilty of this, and I'm going to say the most low-hanging fruit statements that I can find, even though I have no evidence of him being involved in any terrorist attack, but I'm just going to say it because I don't like him. And then he's going to say that I don't like Ali because Ali, his manager, has been involved in some nefarious things, according to Conor McGregor and his team and whatever it is that they found on Ali Abdel Aziz. So there's a lot of things to take a look at when you consider, let's say, somebody that is in the opinion of Conor McGregor against Khabib. But what I know about Khabib, quite honestly, is that he grew up doing nothing but sports his entire life. Now, not to say that his dad is a pacifist, but guess what? His dad refused to go to war with the Soviet Union against the Afghans. Now, you can probably say, well, that's because he doesn't want to fight a radical Afghani, Sunni, Islamic group or anything like that. Okay, maybe you can lean it towards that direction. But the reality is this, right? There is a difference between radical and extremism. And anybody that looks at Khabib will say, well, this guy is a radical. Well, why? Because he doesn't believe that women should be ring card girls, nor does he even believe that women should compete. So in the Western mindset, this is radical. However, this does not make him an extremist, because an extremist is somebody that is willing to commit violence in the act of religion. So this is not this man. This is not who he is. He is not a violent extremist. Is he a radical? Well, here's something you people have to understand that is very controversial to understand and grasp. Islam is a radical religion in and of itself. Why? Fasting for 16 hours during Ramadan and doing it for 30 days, that's radical. And actually following through with it, that is radical. Going to Mecca and spending all your money just so that you can experience this Hajj and spiritual upliftment and religious obligation is radical, because you're spending a certain amount of money just to go to a place, but obviously it's meaningful. Obviously you can go to places and create meaningful memories by vacations and whatnot, but you're doing it with going to Mecca, so there's a certain level of radicalism that I guess you have to invest yourself in order to be an orthodox, straight path Muslim. That's just the reality of it. But understand that radical does not mean extreme. You want to know what else is radical in ideas? The idea of being anti-abortion. Now, to some people, that is a radical idea. It really depends on who you are and how you look at the world. But as far as Khabib goes, he's not an extremist. And neither is anybody in his team. Now, here's the other complicated nuances that you got to understand. Within that community, are there people that are going to be even more extreme? Yes. Because people come in variations. And there are people that are going to have something in common, and they're going to bond with that, but then they're going to go against each other in, let's say, certain political ideas that they may not agree on. What's an example of this? I'll give you an example. And this has happened in Libya a lot, okay? In Libya, you have people that are for the Islamic State, and then there are people in Libya that are for the Libyan regime that is currently controlling the country right now through the form of a government, okay? And they play both sides. Now, what is the reason for this? Maybe the reason why the people in Libya who are both in the Islamic State and in the government forces are playing both sides is primarily because of the fact that it's either economic reasons why they're doing it. Maybe both sides are paying them, and perhaps maybe they have an economic reason for it. Or maybe an ideological reason, leaning one way or another, being pro-government or anti-government, i.e. the Islamic State. Or there's an even bigger complications to the nuances that we're talking about, where people have dual ideologies. And what do I mean by that? Well, there are people that believe that the Islamic State should be established, but they also want to side with the government so that when the Islamic State comes in, maybe they can negotiate with them or play both sides or whatever it is that comes with this dual dual neutrality or dual identity that they have going on within the conflict. So that is the multiple variations that you have to understand with this matter at hand. Not many MMA channels, let alone geopolitical channels, are going to explain to you this particular matter at hand the way that I'm explaining to you right now. Why? Because understand something. When you're dealing with terrorism, when you are dealing with religious extremism, when you are dealing with geopolitics, and then on top of that, when you are dealing with mixed martial arts fighters that are involved in this particular space and being from in a part of the world where radical extremism is prevalent, it's a very complicated situation. Because yes, Dagestan is a very, very conservative country in terms of Islamic practices, but it is also a country that has a certain level of tolerance. There was one time where Islam Makhachev mentioned how people who are going to nightclubs in Dagestan are going to enter the hellfire based on this new modernization that the Dagestanis are sort of adopting. So you see, they're not all the same. You look at Islam Makhachev. He goes and takes pictures with women. You will never see Khabib do that. And if you do, it's within a certain distance. There have been pictures with Islam Makhachev sort of putting his arms around other women that are not married to him, which, by the way, is forbidden in Islam. So once again, I'm not here to agree or disagree with any of these actions that they do or the choices that they make in their personal lives, but I'm here to just give you the objective reality and the variations that comes with these types of situations and these types of men, in particular the Dagestanis, Khabib, Islam Makhachev, in comparison to this person that committed this terrorist attack that just happened to be on their team. So don't forget to like and subscribe as I give you guys the best details mixed martial arts can offer in terms of YouTube channels and what I can present in this content and what I can talk about as opposed to what other channels can't talk about. Like and subscribe for that reason alone. I'll see you guys in the next one, and it is getting dark right now on a Monday night here in Sacramento, California, West Side. I will see you guys in the next one, inshallah.